As an engineer, I was always, to be totally candid, afraid of putting down trackable metrics like related to my work. Because as an engineer, a lot of the work that you do is, at least in a manufacturing type of environment, which is what I worked in, there's a ton of variables, and you're in a firefighting mode quite a bit. And so a lot of the wins that could be tracked to some sort of a metric like revenue or really out of your hands, especially as like a run and maintain type of an engineer. So even though there were some metrics like on my yearly scorecard that reflected like those sorts of things that could be tracked revenue potentially, it was really tough to draw a straight line between here's what I did and here's how it affected some sort of a revenue or cost number. And so I think most engineers struggle with this as well. Like, just based on my experience, it's something that they don't like to do. And it's just because there's a lot of variables, and there's also an aversion to sales, like selling yourself, like showing what you do and how it affects an outcome. But as I go through a sort of career transition, as I'm in kind of right now, is I've moved into business development full time in my 9 to 5. In my side work, I'm constantly trying to sell the service that I'm doing. I've really had to take on that mental block head on, and I'm particularly thinking about it today because I have been tasked with coming up with a 2026 marketing budget for one of my clients, and it's something that's going to be pitched to the C-suite. And so I've really had to take a deep dive into what did I do for them and how did it affect the bottom line. And so it's really a straight line, which is cool. But it just really reflects back onto I've always had that mental blocker in my head. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of just creating wealth, is being able to take credit for that kind of work that you do and how it affects the bottom line. I think about Naval talking about project work is where the money is made, and not a salary. And there's a couple reasons that I think that that's particularly true. In project work, you're getting paid for an outcome. And so at the outset, at the beginning of the project, what you're selling the project is an outcome, essentially. That's really what people buy. And most business owners that I've talked to, they care about revenue. They care about how is this thing that they're going to pay for going to make them more money. And that's totally fair. And that's how business works. As a salaried employee, there's just a level of abstraction away from that. And for good reason. As an employer, you want your employee to be separated from that. You don't really want them to know exactly how much money they're making you. Especially in a big F500 corporate environment, like for one, they're so big that it's really hard for them to know. It's really hard for them to account what an individual employee contributes, unless you're like in a sales role. But also the other reason is that if you're salaried, they're going to make a multiple of your output, and if you're making $100,000 a year, add like 1.5, multiply 1.5 by that to account for all the fringe benefits that they have to pay for, medical, insurance, etc. $150,000. When they hire you for that role, they are banking on you providing an output that is greater than your cost. And so it's really in their favor that you don't know what that is, because you could be making that on the free market. If you left your job and you did it for yourself, it's probably 2x at least. So, whatever you're doing in your job right now, if you could sell yourself well enough to someone to do that service, you could probably make $300K as opposed to $100K. So that's really why it's hard. It's very ambiguous to figure it out on your own. But if you can do that, and if you can start offering that service on your own, that's just why business for yourself is much more lucrative, is because you can draw that straight line. You can actually see how much value you provide, and it's way more powerful. it really creates it's empowering because it directly reflects the value that you do. And if you own a business, if you're providing a service, if you don't do that, if you don't provide that outcome, like if you don't make your customer 200K and they're paying you 100K, then they're going to get rid of you, and that's totally fair. So if you are a high agency individual, you're going to figure out how to provide those results. And so as close as you can get to directly drawing that straight line between here's what I provide, here's what it will provide you, that's the first step to creating wealth for yourself. And so it's a good exercise, even if you're working a 9 to 5. Try to figure it out. Like, say you're doing a cold email campaign. You need to see how many leads that's going to bring in, and then you also need to know how much each lead costs. And then if you could even take it a step further and figure out like how much you're paid per hour, and then how many of those you can crank out an hour, and then that really can show you how much money that you could be making for yourself if you're selling your own service. It's a good exercise, and it's really the basis of just like business and providing value in the marketplace. So that's one of the things that I'm working on, is just like getting super granular. Like I've talked to people like Daniel Fazio that runs, he's doing like it's just a crazy number that they do per month through his SaaS and service businesses. But if you talk to him and you look at his spreadsheets, like he has it down to the minute of how much like CAC to LTV per customer, and like how much time it takes for each person to get a lead, and how much that lead generates on a conversion level. And it's just something to strive for. I think if you start doing if you have any inclination to getting even a raise at your job, it's like you're going to tie your output into a trackable metric that moves the line forward for the business. So yeah, it's a good exercise. I would recommend that you do that. It's something that I'm working on too. So yeah, good luck. Have fun.